Okay.
Okay, here we go. Folks, welcome back inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. Coming to you on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live, download our free app, and stream all of our live local programming, including the Jake Feinberg Show. We can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today, and what an honor to bring back a dear friend of the program and somebody who we continue to stretch out and analyze addiction and genius and how it plays into the role of the psyche and the misinformation and what still needs to be done as it relates to addiction. Monica Getz, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you.
You know, I wanted to ask you about a guy. I found an album the other day. Can't remember the name of it. It was him as a leader, but did Albert Daly hang out a lot at the house?
Yeah. Albert was one of Stan's favorites, and Stan, in fact, we built a recording studio here with Jonathan Horwich, which was just wonderful. And Albert was one of the first people to record there.
And Stan, because I mean, Stan and him would just do like duo sessions together, you know?
Yeah, they really were in tune with one another. They really, Stan would seldom play with anybody but whom he really felt in tune with. So they were very close.
I wanted to ask you. This is something again. I want to get your reaction. You are a musical. You're a big fan of music, and you dig good music. In the late 50s, my feeling is that, and I want you to tell me the truth. Stan, in around 59 or so, he was itching to return to the States after he heard John Coltrane, his dear friend's "My Favorite Things." And he started to he realized that there was a new wave of jazz coming in, and he wanted to come back to the States. And I wanted you to tell me why you guys decided to move back, if that was the reason, because he was itching to sort of get on. Because when he came back, the producers and people were saying, hey, we're worried that you've lost some sort of, like, they were jazz musicians. They weren't iconic rock stars. So they were worried about his fan base. And they said, just do pop stuff. Just do stuff that's going to be recognizable so you can rebuild. And Stan was like, absolutely not. And he was doing this crazy stuff with Scotty LaFaro. And then eventually Focus came in. But that initial impetus to move back was because of Train and Miles. Is that right?
No, it's not.
Good. Go ahead.
I don't know where did you get that from?
Well, again, this is out of the Magan book, and again, I have.
Magan is not somebody that I would consider a source of the absolute truth. Magan never met Stan, and Magan did construct things out of the air very frequently.
But let's just be clear: Stan was he was winning downbeat awards. He was a competitor. There was a burning desire. You can't just say there wasn't a desire to come back, because there was this new wave of music going on.
Yeah, but it has very little to do with that. It had a lot to do with the fact that Stan, any musician, any expatriate that lives in Europe, after a while, they feel the need to come back to New York. New York is the pulse of where everything happens. And I think what drives people to be in Europe is a multifactorial thing. A, they are very much more respected in Europe, even to this day, than they are here. I'm talking about jazz musicians.
Right.
Also, they are paid better. They have peace and quiet, and they can relax. There's so many factors that lead people to live in Europe and to move to Europe. But when it comes to creativity and where things are happening, and I once heard, I think I mentioned this before, at a lecture somebody saying there's genius, and then it's something called genius, which means that when high-level creative musicians get together in the same spot, they sort of spark off one another and inspire each other to higher and higher levels, not necessarily as competition, but as inspiration. And Stan felt more and more comfortable and isolated, and I think that that comfort in itself was an inspiration for a while. But being able to hang out in Birdland or hang out in Basin Street East or whatever it was in those days with other musicians, he craved that.
Right.
I respected that. But I told him it's on a condition that you remain yourself, that you don't just hang out for all the wrong reasons, which is very easy for an addicted person to do in New York. So this is where I think I helped him really hang on to the kind of inner truth that he had musically. I was not going to have all these producers intimidate us, especially his own record company president. It was just amazing that they had the nerve and to try to get with some kind of a popular thing.
See that. So I just want to be clear. You were as much a driving force to say to Stan, do not go down this pop road, because I know that they were, essentially he had been in Europe for quite a while and enjoying, like you said, that comfort. But then Stan, being somebody who loved the communal nature of melodic music, jazz, wanted to come back, and they wanted to play it safe. And you were saying no. No. And then because
that was, we gave up a lot because the children had security. We had a lovely place to live. My wonderful relatives were of incredible support to Stan. And the only condition that I was willing to move was if he was going to utilize that opportunity, because I knew it would mean a sacrifice for all of us, including the children. When we first came here, we lived in a horrible hotel right in the middle of Manhattan. So I think it wouldn't be worthwhile to give up all those things. The security stand was relatively well. There was no drugs available. I just wanted to make sure that it would become musically valuable for him. So I did not for one moment think that he should become anything else but what he was, and that he should remain true to that. And I think he was grateful to me for that.
Could you talk about the time that you first felt that you could spend the rest of your life with Stan? And when he was in the hospital detoxing from morphine and you brought him a batch of Sinatra records?
Yeah, that was a very romantic time.
Can you talk about that? Because this is part of this is
he
really part.
He had just been on the verge of death, really, and he had been on the verge of death many times in his life. But I think that was when he was told by the doctors that he could never play again.
Can you just go? I don't want to interrupt. Can you go back and explain why he got to that point to begin with, and where you were at that point? Because I know you were trying to keep him on the straight and narrow, but his lungs were not so good. Can you talk about what preceded that near-death situation?
Well, he had, if people have an addiction problem, I know now, in retrospect, their chances of staying, almost any addict can stop or change addictions, change from alcohol to Valium, marijuana to sexual addictions. The addictive quality is constant, and it really is just a merry-go-round. But the people that have the best prospect of recovering, which today is a great prospect of getting rid of the addiction, are the ones that keep going to a 12-step program, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know that at the time. He didn't know that at the time. And so he could stop for periods of time, but he would eventually relapse no matter how much he really didn't want to relapse. In that atmosphere and without the discipline of the 12-step program, I don't think that he really would have lived very long until he finally found it at Hazelden, Minnesota. That was the major turnaround for him. So
going back to the bedside, though, what endeared you to him that night that you said, "I love this man"?
Because he was then he had almost died. He had gotten an infection from needle marks or whatever, and was really, really sick. And he had come to look me up and try to speak to my mother and to plead with us, because I had pretty much had it with him after he had come to Sweden, and I saw that he wasn't serious about being drug-free or alcohol-free. So he had gone up, and I don't know what had exactly happened. He claimed that he had an infection from a mosquito bite, and I doubt that.
Right.
But whatever it was, he got double pneumonia, ended up in the hospital. My family ended up taking care of him. There was a shortage of nurses, and we, even though, we really saw to it that his life was saved, and he had the best of doctors. And then after he was saved from the double pneumonia, which probably destroyed his lungs pretty much, then he was moved to my cousin's department, the psychiatric department, to withdraw him from whatever he had to be kept on during the time that they saved his life in the infectious disease department. And that was when I saw him clean and sober and his purest self. And it was a tremendous change from the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. There's nothing attractive about Stan when he was using, really. He became very evil and very manipulative, and it's a classical terrible story. And I think different people and different areas of the brain get affected by the alcohol. So some alcoholics just fall asleep and they don't harm anybody, but he comes from an area in Russia where it's very common to go berserk and become quite evil and quite manipulative and very convincing as a liar. And that wasn't the part that I fell in love with.
No,
I fell
I
in
know.
love
This
with
is so amazing because, well, first of all, yeah, so I mean, can't, like...
He was, the vulnerability, and in those days, he was very humble, you know. That changed later when he began to believe in his own publicity. But he was very humble and very sweet and very appreciative, and we had the same taste in everything. We had so much fun, even though we came from entirely different backgrounds. We were kind of FDR politics, in love with those old movies and the old values, and we read the same books. I told you when I first met him in Washington, D.C., he was reading this book, The Bridge Over. I was reading the book in the green room, The Bridge Over San Luis Rey by Thornton, and he told me to turn to the last page, and he quoted the whole last paragraph from just memory. I was so impressed.
Do you did you feel like you stayed with him because you wanted to help him, or because you get fed up with him, right? I mean, he would clearly...
Well,
I mean,
You have to think of him as two persons. You have to think of him. I would never allow him to be in our home um, while high or drunk because it was abusive to the children. As you mentioned, that scene with Steve, that was just a drama queen, you know, on trying to get attention. He wasn't he didn't have any gas on. It was ridiculous. But why should the children see such a thing?
But I mean, Steve, you sent Steve in though. You didn't want to go in.
No, no. Where do you get that? Why would I send Steve in?
I guess what I'm saying is,
I always was trying to protect the children from seeing his worst side.
the story is that Stan was in a rage. The whole family was outside, and you said, being the oldest, you said, "Steve, please go in and check on your father." And Steve went in.
Complete nonsense. Complete invention.
So who went in?
We were all in. We weren't outside.
And so he was actually, the stove wasn't on, and he was...
No. He was trying to bring to my attention that he was going to kill himself. And we've been through this so many times. I don't know if you know people who constantly threaten to kill themselves. Whenever I put my foot down and said, "You're not going to use drugs in this house, you're not going to behave this way in this house," we have, at that time, I think we had 3 children from a former marriage that had experienced the abandonment of their mother.
Right.
I wasn't going to break up that family again. When I married him, I made a commitment that this was going to be a good, wonderful, healthy environment for all of them. I didn't have any interest in Steve seeing him like that. I don't know where these stories come from. You see, that's the problem with Magan's book.
You do keep going. Listen, regardless of the factual part of it, you are talking about somebody who was Jekyll and Hyde. So to deny that these things did go down is, to me...
No. It's not a denial. Did I say it happened? But Steve happened to have just come in there, and he thought he was actually going to kill himself. But there was absolutely no such thing going on at that time. He was just highly manipulative.
He was highly manipulative when he was abusing drugs and alcohol.
Yes.
Right. So,
and even there is a saying among people who are familiar with alcoholism and drug addiction called a dry drunk. These isms, so to speak, this behavior doesn't disappear magically when they sober up. Sometimes they act in a very self-centered and very defensive way, and denial is not just a river in Egypt. Denial is part of the disease, and that's why I get a little offended when you say I'm denying, because that is what going to Al-Anon means, is to get out of your denial and to face the fact that this person is sometimes completely out of control, and all you have to do then is to make sure that you and your home stays as sane as possible.
So I'm going to read you this quote from Stan, and I want you to extrapolate on this because it's an important part of his artistic genius. And I've talked to a bunch of musicians who have alluded to this, but I want you to talk about it. He said, "You rehearse as little as possible, and the less you concentrate, the better. That's the best way to enter the alpha state. The more you tighten up physically and mentally in jazz music, the worse it gets." Can you talk about the alpha state? Many people talk about...
Absolutely.
Yeah, good.
I really give Stan credit for this, because he figured out very quickly that when he was sober, he could induce in himself something he called relaxed concentration. he had a technique that was almost infallible. So even if he took a vacation, which he sometimes did, for 6 months, he would very quickly get the technique back. But what he valued was the inspiration sometimes from being away from jazz music and getting maybe listening to classical music and listening to other musicians and just living life. And then he would get back into that wonderful, hungry state of giving it his all without tensing up. And he went to neurologists, actually, to see, while sober, how he can induce that relaxed concentration without alcohol, without pills, without drugs. And those are called the alpha waves. When he was in his ideal state of playing, what he called relaxed concentration, they could actually measure in his brain that he was in an alpha state.
Could you talk about it from the point of view of being an audience member, and when you would look into those blue eyes where he was just, what was that like in it as far as a patron of the arts when he was locked into that alpha state?
He would keep his eyes closed mostly when he played. Um, he didn't focus much on the audience or on anything else but the other musicians, the communication that was going on stage. But almost all of his best music was done clean and sober. Not all of it, absolutely not. And I think that's another reason why musicians are drawn to alcohol and drugs, because they're trying to induce that relaxed concentration. But the very best is if they can induce that without the alcohol and the drugs. Didn't I tell you about when he came home and he thought that he had touched God, and we listened to the tapes and it was just nonsense? You get that feeling sometimes when you're high, I suppose, that you're playing just perfect, and then when you listen the next day, it's just nonsense. It's just a subjective experience. It really isn't objective. And in jazz, you can get away with it. He used to laugh and say, "It's a lucky thing that I'm a jazz musician because sometimes I fake it."
You know, it's talking to Monica Getz here on the Jake Feinberg Show. Can you talk about Goldie worshipped Stan, held him to an incredibly high standard of perfection. Can you talk about the impact that her passing had on Stan, and how that factored into the seminal album that he did? Because, you know, I talked to Miroslav Vitouis, okay, and he was part of Weather Report, and he went back and started to talk to me about the fact that really the first cats that were using the bass as an individual voice were people like Scotty LaFaro with Bill Evans around the time that Stan and you came back from Europe. Mm-hmm. Now, I've interviewed Creed Taylor several times. That album, Focus, is a seminal album, and it was a tribute to his mother who passed. But can you talk about how that all came to be? And because there was no traditional rhythm section outside of Roy Haynes on a couple of tracks. And Creed said that Stan basically improvised the entire thing without any charts. So I just would like you to talk a little bit about the loss of his mother, how he handled that. Did he fall back into bad habits? And what is that album, when you listen to it today, or whenever what is that significance in his career? Because that was the beginning, in my mind, of his transition from a serious bebop player to now creating a legacy as a totally individual his own jazz.
Well, his mother did die that summer, but it was a difficult summer for Stan. Um, what happened was that he was given an opportunity um, to create a record completely the way he wanted to, and he had never forgotten Eddie Sauter. Eddie Sauter, he considered to be not just a soulmate, but a genius that had been ignored for too long and relegated to making commercials and horrible things. Such a enormous
jingles and stuff. Yeah, it was
right.
because Stan felt it was like beneath Eddie. He should be doing higher quality, higher.
Right.
Yeah.
And Stan's mother died, and Stan, I think, was on medication actually during that time, and was unable to grieve because she was a major influence on him. But I don't think you have that right that she pressured him to be a perfectionist.
No, I listen. I interviewed in person Red Press, who was part of that saxophone sextet, and neither you or I was around in those ghettos in the Bronx. But in order for the Jews at that time, they were being beaten up every day by the Italians and the Irish, and to get out of the ghetto, you had to be beyond perfect. So I mean, really, and also obviously he was on the road at ninth grade with Tea Garden and totally exposed to beyond, certain behavior by adults. But I mean, what did it mean? What was the significant? His mom idolized him. His brother couldn't. Stan was the golden child. If there was one piece of meat on the table, her husband wasn't getting it. His brother wasn't getting it. Stan was getting it. So what?
That part was horrible. Robert was such a lovely brother. But you see, that was the Jewish mother. You should know better than anybody.
My mom is actually, no, and in full, listen, my name is Jewish, and my dad is Jewish. My mom is Catholic.
Ah, so I can't talk to you
no,
about
but
that.
she loves, but she's
the
very Jewish.
Mother in New York,
yeah.
I have learned since then, and my mother was one of the great psychologists of the world, and Stan's mom was a typical Jewish mother. However, she had a very high IQ. She was stunningly beautiful when she was young. But I don't think her marriage was that exciting. And when Steve came along, he became the center of her world, undoubtedly. But she probably would not have let him go on the road at all. The reason that he went with Tea Garden was that she was in Philadelphia visiting her relatives in Philadelphia, and Stan's father, who was struggling with his printing business, found it too tempting when Stan had this offer to go with Tea Garden. So I don't think that you have that right, because even though I didn't know them at that time, they many times laughingly told me what it was like. I heard from Bob, his brother, and from Goldie herself, and from Stan himself, and from his father, what it was like. I never heard what Red Press said, that they felt that they were in the ghetto. They felt that they were middle class like everybody else. They probably were in a ghetto, but maybe in that part of the ghetto it wasn't so violent. But it was more than the way I heard Colin Powell talk about it. The mothers leaned out the window, and they saw their kids get into some kind of fight or something. They would be on the jungle telephone immediately calling each other and say, "You better go and get your son," blah, blah, blah.
Well, let me just put it this way, because you've been referencing back to the area of Russia that he's from. There were gulags there. The Jews were being murdered there.
But Stan wasn't from there. He was 2 generations away from that.
Just hear me out.
Yeah.
When they moved to the States, the Jewish people, I mean, there were Nazi rallies in Madison Square Garden. There was still a huge amount of anti-Semitism. In order to get out of the ghetto, you had to be beyond perfect. Coming from where he came from to where he wasn't, if you wanted to get out of that life, believe me, they had an ice block there with a fan blowing on it. It was not an ideal thing. Now, that being said, his dad couldn't keep a job. He had to go on the road with Tea Garden. His dad was making no money. They had no choice. He had to go. And he wanted
No,
to go. And he wanted
no,
to.
no, no. I beg to disagree with you because this is something that really interested me so much. It wasn't like that for Stan. He felt pretty much that he had not to get out of the ghetto. You know that Stan really didn't want to be a musician. He really wanted to be a doctor, and Stan's mother, of course, my son, the doctor, that was the ultimate goal. So he always was thinking about making enough money and being able to save it to go to medical school. He never once said to me, I had to get out of the ghetto. I think there were parts of the Bronx that maybe was like that, but this little area where he lived, they even felt that they had enough left over to have another charity for people that were even poorer. They went to synagogue. They had a social life. I have never heard Stan mention that he was beaten up in any way.
Oh, I'm not saying Stan personally. I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
Desperate to get out of the ghetto. In fact, many times he sort of felt a little regretful that he went on the road, because he was going to the Monroe High School. He enjoyed studying. I never had that impression, not once, and I've heard him talk about his childhood so many times.
Sure. No, I mean, I'm not saying he specifically. I'm just saying he. But going back to, if you could just talk a little bit about, you know, the impact that his mom, like, did Focus come out after his mom passed or before? Because he dedicated that album to his mother.
Well, I dedicated it because I wrote the liner notes. I think he had a very strange reaction to his mother's death. He never really grieved, and it came out in that music, I think. That's what I believe. Because he really had a very sort of zombie-like reaction to his mother's death. And I think that the music in Focus was something that he always wanted to do. He always wanted to be a free spirit, and he loved strings, and he loved that whole challenge. And his mother just happened to die in the middle of all that. Maybe that's why he never seemed to grieve. I didn't see him have one tear when his mother died. And it happened in my house. We had, or in our house, it was on my youngest daughter's birthday. She had been in a car accident. And, of course, being the, perceiving herself as the strong Jewish woman that she felt that she was, even though the doctor said she was in a car accident going to a pinochle game or something with her friends. And all of them had a bit of a concussion, and they were all told, all these women, to take it easy and not do anything strenuous. Well, she got up and she ironed and obviously did all the things that she shouldn't have done. And on that day when she came out to our house, it was actually a house in White Plains here, and I could see that half her face was drooping, and I said, Goldie, please, are you feeling okay? She said, no, I have a terrible headache. So I went straight to the phone, even though it was my daughter's birthday, and called a doctor, said, emergency, I think my mother-in-law's had a stroke. And so she lied down on a couch. And then I went off to the phone again, and she needed to go to the bathroom. So they, men that were there, fathers, helped to the bathroom. Of course, that was the very wrong thing to do. And when I saw that they were doing that, I said, no, she has to be completely still. But by that time, her stroke was really very bad, and I had to get in the car. The doctor came. I had to get in the car, drive all the way out to Queens to kind of break this gently to Stan's father, who adored her. And this was one of the hardest things I had to do because they said, you can't tell him he's really diabetic. You'll have to just keep him going until he gets to the hospital. Well, when we arrived at the hospital, she was dead, and he was really not prepared for that, nor was I. And I could hear while I was parking the car and he got in the hospital, how he cried out, and it was very traumatic. Stan, however, was strangely cool as a cucumber, and there is a beautiful habit of sitting Shiva, and he really wasn't all there, I think. Maybe he was numbed. I don't know, but I know his Aunt Shandel, his mother's sister, was quite outraged because she felt that Stan wasn't grieving appropriately, and but he was in the middle of that record. Maybe he was so into the record, and he gave it his all, and thinking about his mother, he probably played his heart out. This was what I'm projecting, because I never figured out really what was going on with that.
Wow, that's a very heavy story. What was it like when cats like Norman Granz, because Stan he was barred in Britain from playing for a minute. They found out about his drug bust the year before. Stan tried to get Norman Granz to intervene on his behalf, and Granz said to him, "I won't fight for you if you're going to get high. Clean up your act." Did that resonate with Stan? Granz was so essential for that. You can say what you want about the music itself of Jazz at the Philharmonic, but he really did. When Stan got out of jail the first time, he was there to provide work opportunities for Stan. But outside of you not tolerating that kind of behavior, did pep talks from people like Granz have an impact on Stan, or was he kind of what does that do? I guess more to the point, with an addict, does it only last? Is it only a short period of time where that has an impact?
No, I really appreciated Norman, and so did Stan. I really do think that he did appreciate him, but he also realized that he made a lot of money, generally, off musicians who.
That's right. That's right. That's a very good point.
Who weren't in a position to bargain with him because they were so starving, and so he saw both sides of that. And I think if you know anything about addiction, nagging and lectures is generally not effective unless you do it as an intervention. Do you know what an intervention is? It's when several people that are important to the person get together in a room, because they are very good at deflecting one person's lecture. But if there's a whole bunch of people that is basically his system, people that he admires, people that he wants to impress, if they are all in the same room and they kind of have prepared for this, then it's a very hard thing for a person to deny and excuse and make explanations. And that usually works very well. But in those days, none of us knew about this. And I know Norman meant well, but he also made plenty of money on Stan and the other musicians.
No doubt about it. But what I'm saying is, when he would go and say, "Clean up your act," would Stan... Would he resist?
There were other things that were more compelling. Like, for instance, he wanted to play in England. This is what's called tough love.
Right. That's right. You're 100%. Also, I want to ask you something else before you go on.
Yeah.
He had he couldn't play. He had his cabaret license denied in New York City, which is, I think, one reason you went. He couldn't play in New York for a while. This is tough love, right?
Well, this was what I consider one of our major accomplishments.
Break it down.
He could not play in New York, and I think he was the first musician after a drug conviction that was able to get it back by proving that he was trying to get better and was better. And so we challenged the whole system here in New York and managed to get his. There was a wonderful. We eventually got a wonderful accountant called Izzy Stratner, and his brother, I think it was Maxwell T. Cohen. I don't know why they had different names, or maybe it was his uncle. He was a lawyer, and we really went to bat for Stan and testified, and they did home visits, and they take blood tests and urine tests, and Stan was fine, and they could not deny him the liquor license. Otherwise, it was by rote. Once you were convicted, you could never get it back. But he got it back.
Like, so he got it back relatively quickly, or but he didn't have any work in New York, so eventually.
Well, he could always have work in New York, but he didn't. He wasn't able to play because he didn't have that liquor license.
He didn't have the liquor license, so he couldn't play.
Yeah.
So and then you advocated, but that this fight, how long did this advocacy have to go on until he was, like you said, he was.
Well, there were so many things that were happening at the same time. The thing with the children,
yes.
you know,
Yep.
his mother, the children's mother disappeared. I had to come to New York, move into that little apartment with the children, clean that up, which was just an unbelievable thing. And then go to court and try to see to it that the state didn't take charge of the children because Stan couldn't get custody because of his conviction. In those days, it was very strict law. So CPS were going to take care of the children, and I knew Stan would never be happy without his children, and they were the sweetest thing in the world. I just so wanted them to have a normal, healthy life. So I got custody with Goldie's help because Goldie said she was too old and couldn't handle 3 small children. And so she went in there and we testified and we got the children. And then at the same time, we discovered Stan's father came to me with a suitcase full of bills. He had never paid a bill, I think, in his entire life. Not only that, what had happened during his drug years and alcohol years, that he had come across a pamphlet where you deduct a certain amount of money that you're supposed to give to the government for the musicians, and that made him appear like a professional band leader. So he dutifully, and he was very good at arithmetic, collected the money, but he wasn't clear about where he was supposed to pay it in. So with all his drug needs and everything else, the money disappeared. And I had no clue about this. So I decided, like a dutiful Swedish citizen, I'm going to go to the IRS and earnestly say, now we're going to pay everything back, and maybe we could have a payment plan. Instead, I was handed an envelope and very clearly told that this collection agent, which shall remain nameless,
yes.
but it's in my mind, wanted a hefty hefty bribe.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and I refused. And so, thinking that this is an unusual thing at the time, apparently my accountant said it was a very common thing. Instead, we hired through Donna Reed, who was my maid of honor. You know who Donna Reed is, right? She made this movie, The Benny Goodman Story, with Stan.
Wow. Oh, that's right. Okay. Yeah. I was going to ask you about that too.
Steve Allen had the lead in Donna, and so we got to be really good friends, Donna and I. And so she helped us get an attorney in Wall Street for one of the major legal firms. But you can just imagine what that cost and how many years that took, because this was a felony to take money out of the musician's paycheck and pocket the money. So that's what he had done all those years. And he said he just didn't quite understand the system. And so we paid all that money back. And so not only could he not play? But when he started to be able to play, because we got his liquor license straightened out, the IRS was there collecting pretty much 100% of the money. So you can imagine that it was very hard times for us and the three small children.
Going back to his, and I just want you to be as candid as possible, but going back to his issues with his lungs, and the doctor's worried about sustaining permanent damage, you guys went to a Kenyan resort on the Indian Ocean.
Yeah.
And one night at an American oil man's house, drinking a lot of whiskey, Stan drank too much. He smashed his favorite saxophone against the trees. Now, you at the time, not being an academic, you weren't academically understanding of addiction. You tried to flush his pills down the toilet, and he beat you severely. And
It was just
But I know. But this is my question. Stan, you guys made up some story because you were really severely beaten. Your face was seriously beaten, and
No, it was one shot. It was just one, but that's all it took. It was a very frightening experience.
Mike, the thing is that in your mind at that, like, you said you took away you were flushing his pills down. Can you just take us into that? Because here's the thing. The reason this is compelling is because this is living in the moment with somebody when they are not themselves, and they are.
Absolutely. And that was a wake-up call to me.
What was the wake-up call?
Yeah, it was a wake-up call. How dangerous he was when he was determined to get drugs or whatever. So what happened was that we were in a hotel in Nairobi, and he had secretly from a doctor gotten a prescription of something or another, and I had realized that he had a paradoxical reaction that means the opposite of what you're supposed to have to these pills. These are called Tuinals, Secanols, barbiturates. And instead of being able to sleep on them, that was the intention, he would become more and more agitated, and he would take more and more pills, and he would become absolutely out of control. So I knew what these pills meant. And immediately when I saw the prescription, I flushed him down the toilet. He happened to walk into the bathroom right at that moment, and his immediate reaction was just a fist right in the middle of my face, and I saw pieces of bone flying. It was really unbelievable. And
wow. He shattered your orbit bone or your nose or what?
My nose. And what happened was almost now in retrospect, I guess I could laugh at it, but they put him in Africa in some kind of cage, like an animal. The hotel people called the police. I didn't know any of this. All I know is that they called an ambulance for me, and they took me right to the hospital, and luckily there was a surgeon there from England who was just wonderful and reconstructed my nose. And when I asked about Stan, they said I had the consul, the Swedish consul, was a friend of my friends with my parents, he and his wife. And they came and they tried to find out what had happened to Stan. And in Africa in those days, they put violent people in a cage.
In a cage?
So
in a cage?
Yeah,
in a cage? In a cage.
In a cage. And so they got him out, and he was just inconsolable. So sorry, and I guess he spoke the truth that this was the pills. But I was very apprehensive, and I had to kind of conceal this and say, and that's what you did in those days too. It's typical of domestic violence, really, but that wasn't such a word even, concept then. But I told my family when we got back, I had this big cast on my face that we had been in a car accident. But I had great reservations about where this relationship would go.
I can't. I mean, that's what I'm saying is that in forgetting about even the domestic violence laws, someone is as I mean,
There were no such laws then.
I know what I'm saying is that, but just being somebody from the family you come from, being a beautiful person inside and out, it's like I'm amazed that you wouldn't. I mean, he just,
Yeah,
you know. I mean,
that was a cross point there where I actually, when I returned to Sweden, I went to stay with my grandmother, and I told them I thought there was gonna be no future in this relationship, but Stan's determined. Oh my God, I've never seen anybody so determined. And
could you give an example? I mean, determined to keep you.
Yes.
Can you give an example of that? Because what I'm trying to get at is, at the end of the day, when
he sent a letter to my grandmother in English with flowers to her, to me. It was the year I was to be presented for the court. That's normally what happens to noble families in that era.
Wow.
And he was absolutely despondent. He didn't feel that he could live without me, and he just wouldn't leave us alone. And
hold on for a second. Okay, stop. He wouldn't leave you alone. So, but from your point of view, as somebody who just
from my point of view,
you got your face beaten, and after you took him to a place. Here's the context of it is that his lungs were damaged. The doctors told him he wouldn't play again. You were so in love with this individual that you took him to dry out, and he winds up. What does he do? He beats you in the face, and now you're saying he wouldn't leave you alone.
Mm-hmm.
So it was
yeah. But what it's interesting. It wasn't him and his pleadings that got to me. What got to me was the reading I'd started to do about alcoholism and chemical dependency and addiction that made me really convinced that these people are out of control, that this is a disease that they didn't ask for, that they didn't want. And I became at that point convinced somehow that if I didn't figure this thing out, I didn't think that anybody could, but I felt that I could not only be helpful to him, but to be helpful to the world, because at that time, no one in Sweden, believe me, knew anything about alcoholism. The physicians, one of which was that so-called expert, was my own cousin, who had written some useless pamphlet on putting vitamin B in alcohol to reduce their vitamin B deficiency. However, eventually, when I started to really study this, which I did, I started to devote myself into studying this. Eventually, after that episode in Denmark, I went to medical school, only to find out that in Denmark medical school, nobody knew anything about alcohol really. And then I studied in this country. I ended up at the Yale School of Alcoholism, finding a pamphlet that my grandfather had written almost 100 years ago that was perfectly clear on the fact that alcoholism is a disease like diabetes and is probably genetically predisposed, and that it is treatable if you can help somebody stay away long enough from alcohol. The only thing my grandfather didn't have was the benefit of the 12-step program.
Here's this is a very important question for this evolving project that we are working on. Did you feel you had to stay, even though he was, he obviously was a beautiful, handsome person. He was he was a very powerful musician. He was somebody who you adored. Even though did you feel like in order to learn, even though you were learning in academia, did you feel like you had to stay in the relationship to get a better understanding of a true addict?
No, I never had that feeling.
Because
but
most people would say
what I did feel. You see, I'm always been very spiritual. Don't talk about it too much, but I am.
Me too. No, I mean, I just feel that.
And I felt that God wanted me, that this was a challenge, just like for my grandfather, it was a challenge to walk from, he was an explorer, he walked from the southern tip of Africa to the northern tip.
My gosh.
This was my area to explore and to be helpful to humanity. I really felt that God wanted this me to follow my heart, and I had this long discussion with my father, who you can imagine was not thrilled about the prospects of me marrying.
If you were I have 2 daughters, and if my daughter came home, I would have gone and tried to kill Stan.
Yeah.
So I mean, so how did you so continue? I didn't mean to cut you off.
First of all, never told him about this so-called.
It was a car accident. It was a car accident. Right.
Never told him, but I did tell him about the addiction, and because he was a physician, he said, "Monica, I know not enough about addictions, but I know enough to know it's almost impossible for them to get out of it. And if anyone can, maybe he should not have said this, but he did say this, if anyone can win this by love, you can. And if not, I think you're intelligent enough to extricate yourself. But I would be the last person to tell you not to marry because of love."
Let me ask you, being that he was an explorer and his eyes were wide open,
that was my grandfather. My father was an orthopedic surgeon.
He was if the truth had became known that he had brutalized your face, do you think they would have been? They would not.
I think he would have probably thought differently, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I had 2 fantastic parents who really, really wanted their children to thrive. And I just don't know what he would have said if he had known. My mother was also supportive and wonderful, and she learned later on, of course, what was going on with Stan. And she believed in marriage. She did believe that, and this particular family, you know, there was so much love invested and so much history. The alternative, you know, what is the alternative? I pretty much knew in my heart that if I didn't help him as much as I could to at least some kind of periodic sobriety, that he would probably not live.
What do you say
so many of us
as the spokeswoman for somebody who has done groundbreaking work in Sweden? What would you say to those people that say, Monica, you enabled him and it was a codependent thing?
Oh, at first, I'd be the first to say.
Mm-hmm.
But I discovered Al-Anon, and Lois, the creator of Al-Anon, became my sponsor. No longer enabling. That was the magic of the 12-step program. When somebody is sick, you usually fluff up the pillow and make them comfortable. Not so with alcoholism. You stop enabling. You let them take the consequences. You take responsibility for yourself. You don't allow the person to influence you, and you just try to be a good example on how to live happily in spite of their shenanigans, because it's really basically people acting with the brain damage, temporary and recoverable brain damage, but they're not functioning with a full deck.
Well,
If he had a brain tumor, would I leave him? if that was his behavior, I
No,
did.
but you were. I mean, I feel like it would have all been in vain because you came so close to being murdered so many times.
I don't think I was close to being murdered. I think that I um, was very brave, and I don't know where that bravery came from, but I was
You were. I
determined.
mean, totally. You're fearless in some ways. But
Yeah,
it's.
yeah, yeah. In a way, I had been given so much. I was
Mhm.
always conscious, and my parents always made me conscious of um, a privilege, and I felt I owed it to God to see this through. At the end, though, when I realized after the bossa nova and Stan was very successful and he started to believe his own publicity and he started to be untruthful, that's when I made a decision when the children were grown and they already had their education that now I'm going to Sweden and I will bring this message to Sweden, which changed Sweden. They didn't have uh, one Al-Anon meeting in Sweden except for one person sitting by the phone waiting for it to ring. Now all of Sweden is full of AA, Al-Anon, of functioning. I think after I came to Sweden with this message about the 12-step program, um, at first I think there were 97 treatment centers from having zero before. All that alcoholics did in Sweden was go to doctors, get a prescription, and now they were dually addicted. And that's when my brother called me, who is a psychiatrist, and said, they're jumping some of our closest friends, a musician, wonderful musician called Beppo Gräsman, who was in my school class. He and his significant other jumped 1 week apart, I think, from a mental hospital because they couldn't solve their alcohol problems. So we said, you have to come here and you have to train our physicians. And I did. And it changed Sweden. I founded the Swedish Council on Alcoholism and Other Drug Addictions. And that's the period when Stan went to California and was certainly enabled.
Well, I mean, you are. I mean, a testament to strength and an inspiration. I think I want to keep. We just went for another 65 minutes here, set 3.
Did we?
Yeah, we did. And you are and just carving out. I mean, this is a beautiful thing, and I will have
Well, I loved him. I loved his music. I loved him when he was at his best. The other side was part of a disease that was in extreme. And I will tell you this, that there was a period when he was getting antabuse. He knew darn well he was getting antabuse because he was the one who initiated it with Dr. Martinsen Larsen in Denmark. I think the problem with antabuse is that it doesn't take into consideration the decision to stay sober. And I think Stan, when he had antabuse and he took it himself, he would just, so you'd never know when all of a sudden he'd become a dangerous person. So I think it was necessary while the children were growing up to have some kind of a insurance that terrible things would not happen. Now, once he had contact with the 12-step program, there was a long period, almost a 10-year period, when he was clean and sober, and we were as happy as could be.
Well, we're going to have to. We have just started to enter the early '60s, and you play a pivotal role in his career, and we're going to do that in the next session.
Okay.
Okay, and I will have a. My plan is to come to Irvington November 9th and 10th. So I will send you the proposal
Okay.
tomorrow, okay? But this is a spiritual thing, and I want you to be very clear to people out there why you decided to stay the course, because there's a lot of people that would say that person can, and I'm not saying, just there's a lot of spouses that would say that dude can go rot in hell and I'll still get educated on the disease. But you decided your love for the family and love for Stan superseded that. And that to me, and the fact that you're still not only with us, you're right with me at all times. It's absolutely a spiritual thing. I mean, I can feel Stan smiling.
I know Stan is proud of me. You know, I will tell you this. We forget too quickly, for better or for worse. And I think life isn't always an ice cream sundae.
No, it's not.
You know,
it's not.
And,
it is
and
not.
and I think we need one of the important things that we need to teach our children is, and ourselves, that life hands you a lemon, you make lemonade. It's not always a picnic, and believe me, Stan and I had wonderful times, and always when he was sober and clean and sober, we were as happy as anybody. Alec Wilder, I just came across a letter that Alec Wilder wrote that he's never seen such happiness and such harmony as with us two. But of course, when one person is using and the other person is not, it's not possible to have a happy relationship. I don't think I can remember a single fight that Stan and I had if it wasn't about addiction. We didn't have those ordinary little household fights about budget or should I buy this house or should I go to school or should I do this or should I do that. We had basically a relationship that was pretty even, even. And we were partners, and I could do certain things that he couldn't do. He could do certain things that I couldn't do. And I don't have a moment's worth of resentment in my heart for him. I really don't.
You know, something came into my mind here that I want you to marinate on and think about is just Stan most likely with some of the issues, not necessarily in Africa, but in today's criminal justice system, Stan would never have gotten out of jail. We've become a more punitive society. So I want you to think about that as it relates to addiction. It's not just about somebody getting caught with a bag of pot. It's the idea that the cops show up multiple times during a night and somebody is clearly injured. That person's, our judicial system, now, our justice system was crude back then. But, I mean, Merle Haggard was arrested 12 times, and he was still making hit records before his record was expunged by Ronald Reagan. So I want you to think about this nexus between the justice system, because you know what? You were able to spend all this...
That's why I created the Coalition for Family Justice. We have now coming up on the 22nd of October a judicial forum where we teach judges how to deal with addiction, because treatment is the answer, of course.
Are you teaching them, or are you educating them?
Well, that's a fine line.
I was going to say, I just don't think a lot of judges like to be taught stuff, but I'm with you 100%.
No, and you know something, that's part of the problem.
I know.
That they don't like to be taught things, because how are these, I feel for judges, because how are these essentially businessmen who are appointed by their colleagues to run or selected to run, not because their knowledge about marital problems or not about their knowledge about domestic violence, but basically because they've done the party a favor of some kind or another. How are they supposed to understand what's going on before them? Somebody who is more skillful at lying usually prevails. Well, who do you think it is? The addicted, charming person, or the victim who's just crying all the time? and is very fearful of even speaking the truth in the courtroom because when they get home, they're going to get it. So,
I mean, it's always
without
yeah.
educating the judges, they don't have a chance to make a good decision.
I would just argue that it's looking back on it. In some ways, it was a blessing because you would maybe. I mean, Stan would have spent a long period of time behind bars in today's modern world with domestic violence, which is not to be taken lightly. But we've become in some ways more punitive. But I think your point of view is, in order to understand the disease, you can't throw these people in a cage. You're not gonna. It's not gonna work.
No. However, I'm not opposed to jail as a consequence as long as it's connected to some kind of treatment. I would say, on the contrary, though, mandatory treatment as an alternative to jail, because sometimes the people are in such denial that unless you have the consequence of jail as an alternative, no one's going to go to treatment, because most addicted persons cannot see themselves as being addicted. They see that they're here because of this or because of that, because of another person. They truly don't have the insight. So you'd be surprised. Our jails would almost be empty if we had treatment as an alternative, because most of the people are there not because they intend to do a criminal act, really. They're there to maintain an addiction. They are there because their judgment is gone. They are there because they decide to drive a car under the influence. Now, if they realized that they would be able to get well, and if they were able to, if the judges swiftly would send them to effective treatment, Delaware had this kind of a system. And it was amazing how many families were rescued and how many good things came out of it. But judges have to have the courage to say, either you go to jail, and most people that I know don't want to go to jail, or you go to treatment.
Monica Getz, it's always a treat to talk to you. Did you received part 2 when I emailed you it last week?
I haven't had a chance to look at it, but I'm going to.
Please confirm that, okay? I want to make sure you have all this stuff, and I'm hoping to get a proposal to you in writing tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay?
Good.
It's always
all right.
It's always so nice to connect with you.
All right, and don't be afraid to ask me these questions, because you keep saying candid. I don't know any other way to be about candid.
Well, it is. It just absolutely, and you're doing you're doing great. I mean, this was another cosmic situation, but I just think it's again, we just want to stay on that spiritual path.
I know, and you know something, it's healthy for me to hear how much mythology surrounds Stan, because some of these things that you mentioned, I've never even heard.
Well, I just want to be clear about something. Maybe it's mythology to you, but a lot of it, that's part of it, is I also want you to understand that I've done a bunch of interviews with people, musicians, people that didn't live with Stan, but they've told stories, and they're not stories, they're real. And so it may be mythology to you, but there is something as heroic and as brilliant as he was also this stuff is not always factually inaccurate. There's some serious baggage there. So I just think it's important.
No. Do you know what I'm talking about? You have to understand what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this ghetto business.
Don't even get caught up in that. Do you have any contact with Alan Greenspan, by the way?
No, I'd like to.
Yeah,
He's married to a Swedish girl, apparently.
No, I was going to say, because
if you can put us together, that would be really interesting.
Let me be clear. That is just stuff that I picked up on. Ultimately, listen, There was no air conditioning. Stan connected with the black community of jazz at that time. He loved it. And at the end of the day, he was, what the point is that Red Press, they were in the saxophone sextet. And they went to perform for a woman at a woman who owned a hotel. And, at the end, everybody played a series of things, and she just pointed to Stan and said, "You are the leader." And she pointed to Stan because it had nothing to do with his technique, because he was definitely the best. Red was 3 or 4 years older than Stan, and Stan was he was young. She pointed to him because he was angelic looking. He was beautiful. So no matter what the reasons why, he did move on from that life. And, you talk to people like, I believe it was, possibly Dr. Cooperman. He grew up in that era. I'll have to send you that interview because,
Send me that interview because I'm the one introduced Dan to Dr. Cooperman.
Well, believe me. Listen, all I'm saying is that this is one of the greatest families in the world. I feel so fortunate to be able to. Cooperman was there too. So the truth is somewhere, the idea here is that no matter what, Stan was destined to move on from that life. But from where he came from in Russia, in order to escape where he was at, he had to be better than perfect. And it's okay. We can go back and forth on it. It's okay.
But I'll beg to differ with you.
That's okay.
He was not a perfectionist. He really wasn't. He was.
You have no idea how many times musicians have told me that Stan played this brilliant set, and he would come back and be so. He said he thought he played terribly because he made one mistake, and it was like these guys were like, "Are you crazy?" I think he was a perfectionist in his own way, but you know better than me. So
well, no, but it was a little bit just slightly different.
Slightly different. By the way, you also. I want to tell you, I want to tell you, my friend. I just want to say that I asked you about why he wanted to come back, and maybe it was because the music was taking on a new shape. But you basically confirmed what I said when you said that he wanted to be back in the culture. He wanted to be back in the jazz community. He wanted to be back, right? He wanted to be back, right?
But he was taken aback once he got here that the music had so completely taken off in a different direction. He really was. You see, in those days, it wasn't all that easy to communicate with what was going on in this side of the world and that side of the world. And
absolutely.
I remember how disappointed he was when he heard all that, what he called hate music. And
he called it hate music? No, he didn't. He did not call it hate music.
He did.
Wow. Okay, so we're gonna let's let Monica have a beautiful day. Please confirm with me that you received part 2. And
he would never call Coltrane's music hate music, but there was a lot of.
Well, I want to get into this. This is important because the main man at this. Listen. On these liner notes, I'll send you a picture of it tonight. It's very clear that John Coltrane, in the eyes of white journalists like myself, was leading the charge in angry message music. So we can, and I don't think Stan believed that, but that's what the white cats were saying. And I've talked to enough black jazzers.
He would never say a bad word about John. Never.
That story, by the way, that story.
Beyond, yeah. But you see, all of this stuff was, a lot of it was created by writers, and like I told you, this little determined German boy was determined to get John to say something disparaging about Stan.
But believe me, that story brought me to tears. I already edited that. That's going to be part of the film. I mean, that to me was like. The story about him and Dizzy with the cool hot jazz and the Coltrane story in the cafeteria. That my life is already. I'm complete on this. So much love to you, Monica. All right, talk to you soon.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Okay.
Cheers.
Talk to you.
Bye.